Shmai, welcome. We're happy to have you all here joining us today. This is the second webinar series that we are having in honor of National Day of Remembrance for U.S. Indian Boarding Schools. It's a educational webinar series in which we're working to create an awareness of U.S. Indian boarding schools and also honor, respect, and show I'm trying to find good words. We're just so honored to have our guest presenter today, Cassey Rowland. Cassey is Sugpiaq from Kodiak Island. She grew up from Old Harbor. Okay. And she currently resides in Kodiak. She also grew up in Port Lions and Ouzinkie too. And today we're honored to have her here today to share her story of repatriation. So yesterday we had a guest presenter provide an overview and history of the impact of U.S. Indian boarding schools. And today we're going to talk about repatriation, how we're healing and how we're working to heal today. So Kuyana, Cassey, thank you so much for being here, and the floor is yours.
Chumai hui Cassey Rowland up the Hatna Anachni Wanilu. I'm Cassey Rowland. It's an honor to do this, and thank you all for joining. I was asked by Tara to speak about this, and honestly, it's a great way to get this story out because it's something that people see and think, like I did, like, oh, I feel bad for those kids, until you realize it's one of yours. And then it really hits home then. So this all started when I got a phone call from the Kodiak Island Museum from April Lactonin counselor. And she called me saying that the Army from the Army base in Carlisle was repatriating kids from there, that certain the ones that were actually buried there at the school. And that was a huge story in itself. It was actually a huge fight at first with I believe it was the Lakota people wanted 7 of their kids back, and the town of Carlisle didn't really want any bad press, so they were fighting back, saying that they were their kids. And they went to court and they won, and in doing so they were able to figure out where, through records, where some of these kids came from. So April called me and she's like, it sounds like Ashouwak. Do you know any Anastasia Ashouwak? And I said no, but I'll call my dad. And they're like, well, we need the eldest person there. And my grandpa has since passed then, but he was alive, but he wasn't able to do it. So due to dementia. So my dad, being the eldest child, had taken over. He was the one who was supposed to take care of everything, saying yes to everything. So I called my dad and his wife, Laura, and Laura is a great historian, and she and the people of the Kodiak Museum and of the Russian Orthodox Seminary here in Kodiak all got together. We got together every month with our findings to make sure we got the proper paperwork in to show that she was actually she was very much our ancestor. And it was over a year-long process. It was a lot of work, but it was all worth it. So once we finally got everything together and all the paperwork together, the Army said that they were going to pay for my dad and Laura and the priest to go get her father innocent. And after putting my heart into this work and trying to figure out what's going on and explaining to my daughter I did not sugarcoat it. I told her exactly what was happening, and she's only 13. It started when she was 12. And I was like, I have to go. I need to honor her and do everything right for her and bring her home. And my daughter, and who has been with me on this whole process, obviously had to go too, which was amazing, because she there were so many similarities between her and Anastasia that it was shocking. They have the same birthday. They look a lot alike. They were both 13 when we went to Carlisle. It was a lot of revelation, sorry. And so we decided to go, and I got the money together and made our way there. It took us 2 days to get there, and we got there a little bit early because that's how it was crazy. The airlines are crazy this summer. And it took us almost 2 days to get to Carlisle. And once we got there, we were exhausted. It was 11:30 at night, their time. And we got there, and then the next day we took it easy and just did a little bit of looking around and stuff. But the day after that, we went to the cemetery. My dad and Laura showed up from Maine. And we went to the cemetery where she was buried, and Father, right there, where that dot is, Father Innocent prayed over her before they started burying her, or what's the word? Not digging up sounds so bad. Sorry. And my dad, being gruff and does not like to be in front of people and not talk, he doesn't like any attention. And he's like, why don't we just bury her up, or get her in the box and just send her to Old Harbor, you know? He's acting all tough and mean, but he's such a teddy bear. He stood over her grave while they were exhuming her, that's the word, for 6 hours straight, and just crying and making sure everything is okay. Sorry. 6 hours in like 90+ degree weather. And it was hotter because you could see the walls around the cemetery for consideration for not, I'm sorry, I have a hard time with words. I'll forget them. I've had brain surgery. So yeah, and so having those walls around made it even hotter in there. It was stifling. But he stood there for 6 hours while they, through the whole process. The only time he would take a break is like, of course, me being Alaskan, we had lunch, and then I'm trying to sit in this weather and I'm not feeling good. So I went to this tent where we did the ceremony, you could see, and there was kind of air conditioning in there so I wouldn't get sick. But yeah, he wasn't leaving. He wasn't going anywhere. He wasn't doing anything. He just stood there the whole time. Um, so once that was done, they exhumed the grave and took her into the one of the other tents where they cleaned everything up. And um, actually, the picture with the headstone shows a little yellow flower that kids would come by and leave as offerings. And they found, while exhuming, similar flowers and coins. You could see a coin on the top of the headstone, and there's some coins and left there from years and years of people honoring these children. But so we did that, and then after that day, you could see pictures of us. Sorry, we went to DC that night and spent the night and this was so fast. We spent like 2 hours looking at a museum and trying to get out to the mall, but it was crazy. It was the 3rd of July. It was bad. There were so many people. I guess it's not bad, but from a small town girl going here, there was just thousands of people everywhere, and they were setting up for 4th of July. But we got to see all this, and it was a great, quick little thing. And my daughter was having the greatest time in the museum, one of the museums. And so after we get back that day, they didn't need us, but this is the 4th of July, these pictures right here. And they took us on a tour of the Army base of Carlisle. And one of these pictures here, the reason why we have them together is this tree my daughter is standing next to. Maybe you could point at it. So over in the other picture is that same tree right there. And it was really hard that day. It was so hard that day going on that tour. It was, like I said before, big feelings. Like, it is a gorgeous place. But at the same time, I felt like all these buildings should have been burned down. It was so sad and so overwhelming to see where these kids lived. And they described how they lived. That was the girls' dormitory. It's now converted into places for military personnel to stay. And I was like, it shouldn't have been that. It should have been, you know. I was so upset, but at the same time, I was amazed by the architecture and how it survived all that. But they had told us about how the kids would come into the train. They took us right to where the train tracks came right to the building, and that building was still there. And they said these kids came off of the train native, went into the building, had their hair cut, their clothes taken away, deloused, and left that building white. I was just like in tears. I was like, that was like one of the, so horrible to hear, you know? And I was like, they weren't allowed to speak their language. So it was overwhelming that day. And that was just the first few hours in the morning of the 4th. And they took us to where these kids who could not go back home because some people saw that these kids were taken away and that there was no culture. They didn't know how to be Native anymore. So they were treated horrible at home. And so some of them just stayed here in Carlisle working, and all the buildings that you see, granite and all the stone masonry, all the not gardens, farmlands, the big houses, they were all tended by our kids. That town is built by our kids. And it started out where in the mornings, they would have their lessons, and then the afternoons, they called them outings, where the kids would go out and go work for people. And some of them were paid, some of them weren't. And a lot of them didn't return, and they couldn't say it. Like being representatives of the army, we had to read between the lines. They were trying to tell us exactly what, without getting themselves in trouble. And basically, these kids would go out, and there's thousands of unmarked graves out there. And the kids that are buried there actually died on campus. Some would escape, some would go elsewhere, but if they died while working out in the farm, they were just buried there. And if they died there, they weren't allowed to be buried in the local cemetery, because they said no browns and no blacks are allowed in their cemetery. So the kids there had to build their own cemetery. They built their own gym. It was so segregated. They had to make everything for themselves there. It was a lot of information in a couple of hours. It was really hard to walk around this area and see and feel all the trauma and everything in that area. It was overwhelming. And so football, they were like, oh yeah, but they were trying to make it better, like, oh yeah, football was invented here. And what is that? Sorry, I forgot his name. I know it all the time, but the famous Olympic and football player, Native American from like the 30s. Does anybody know? He just got his Olympic medals back this last year, or this
I think it's
past
Jim
month.
Thorpe.
Yes, him. He was at the school. Thank you. He went to school here. He was sent here. Obviously did really well in Carlisle. The town is very, very proud that they have him there. And I was like, oh, yuck. So, yeah. And the way that they were treated was horrible. They said that the kids were dormed with like one older one and one little one together to make sure that, or one older kid with several little ones, so that the oldest one could take care of the younger ones. It was very cramped, of course. And then when tuberculosis hit, these kids had no way of really fighting it because they weren't fed. My Anastasia was 16 when she died, and she was only 88 pounds. She had no chance to even fight it. She died within 2 days of contracting it. So it was a lot of anger that day, even though I was happy to see where she was in. There's no way feeling what she went through, but actually another thing too is me being from Kodiak. My daughter, she's looking around and she's like, this is so different from home. I can't even imagine coming here alone. And I was like, you're right. Can you imagine her just taking a 3-month journey from Kodiak to Seattle and then a train all the way there with these other kids? And she was just like, 3 months? I thought 2 days was bad. So yeah, it was very much eye-opening, very eye-opening. And so that day later on, this is the finished product, basically. This is the box that um, we came, we were like, Bailey and I painted it, my daughter. She did the petroglyphs. I did like the colors and stuff, and I wanted to honor both cultures that she would have grown up with, and both Sugpiaq and Russian Orthodox. And it was that's what our 4th of July was. We did that little tiny tour, and then we painted on that box. And I was up till midnight working on the top part with the cross, trying to get it right. I even called like the lady that leads church before the priest moved back to Port Lions. I was like, I can't find it in Russian. I can't find the Holy God, O Holy Mighty, you know. And it was like 10 o'clock at night, and they were like just getting ready for dinner, and she's like, just do it in English. Nobody reads it in Russian anymore. So I was like, well, I worried about this for 2 hours. And she's like, just do it, Cassey. But yeah, Marlene Gunderson helped me on that, the top part. And that's usually put on a ribbon or a cloth in a coffin, written so that it goes with her. And because of the size, it's a pretty small box, and her not, I don't know, it was just her bones and some stuff from like the offerings that people left, the coins, and there were some old flowers, and there's a napkin and her buttons and pieces of her first casket. What happened was they were buried on one part of the boarding school grounds, and then the army came in and they wanted that area for to put up one of their buildings, so they were moved to where they are now, and they were just, some of them just thrown together in a weird little box. There was no they basically hired people to just do it as fast as possible. There was no honor or anything about it. It was just everything thrown into one little a box even smaller than this. So we were able to honor her, both Bailey and I, by putting both cultures in on her box. And normally a lot of people would just write something, like leave the name on there and not decorate it, but I think she needed more. I wanted to honor her by bringing her home and something beautiful. And because we didn't have, they were like, okay, you got to work on this. You have 2 hours. And I'm like, no, I can't do this in 2 hours. And so they graciously gave us like several more hours to work on it some more. And it didn't come out any which way I planned because the time restraint that they gave us for the box. But we did what we could while we were there. And the two symbols, they're actually petroglyphs found around here on Kodiak, and the two whales and the person in the middle are, it was either a shaman going on a spiritual trip, or it's the whales carrying a person to the afterlife. And so we thought that went well with this. Yeah, it was it was almost like after having that tour where I was so angry, so mad. And once I started painting, it was like my feelings were going in there. And I was like, okay, let's not be mad. Let's calm this down and um, make it calming and happy for her. Let's get her home in this. And so we did that. And then the next day, um, we went in and Derek Shia from the museum finally joined us, and we were in the tent while they we this isn't it, but this is the last day. They took us into the tent where they were cleaning her up and separating everything, and they were amazingly gracious and respectful, very respectful. They asked us permission on everything. Um, um, and so we went in to examine her her bones, her body, and to see what was left and what we wanted sent to Old Harbor. And you could see right where the box is, there's a little tiny white grayish bowl. That's actually a Lutuk Sugpiaq style lamp. And my mom carved it specifically for her. We tried to light it, but the air conditioning just wouldn't let it stay lit. But that went with her. And the Mark grabbed some leaves from the local area so that we could set it on there, and that's part of tradition. And I jump around a lot. I'm sorry. And we sent that home, and the dust that was with, or the dirt that was with her, pieces of her coffin, and it was very strange. There was this metal piece. I wish I got a better picture. And it looked exactly like the Questionitsa, the Easter time they bring out um, a likeness of Jesus laying in the tomb, and it had all the same markings and everything. It was very strange for a community like that is so far away from our culture to have something similar. We were astounded. Father Innocent had noticed that, and some of the one of the things I want to point out is Father Innocent had to fight with the army because the army is like trying to send her through courier to Old Harbor, and he's like, no, it's my job to escort the dead home. It's my job. I'm doing this. And so he did that, and I'm so thankful. He got her all the way home. They even had they got stuck up in Anchorage, and so he stayed with her. And so yeah, the ceremony went great. Bailey dressed up in the traditional regalia. She's a Kodiak Island dancer, and there was just all those people standing outside the tent when we left the van and we had to walk through those walls. They just all stopped talking, and Bailey grabbed my hand and she's like, why are they talking? I'm like, because they don't see regalia or people like this honoring their kids. They didn't come in like that. And so yeah, it was like both of us were standing there like they're all staring at us. And so we just kept walking with my dad and them right afterwards, and we went in and we did the ceremony, and it was beautiful. It was beautiful. Father Innocent and a local priest, Russian Orthodox priest, did that ceremony, and then everybody left except for the family, and we got to say our goodbyes, and And this is like something that as our culture that my mom actually reminded me about. Soon as we walked out of the tent after we were saying goodbye, it started raining. And usually it's like really hardcore downpour. But this was like Kodiak misty rain. It was not a hard rain. It felt like our home rain. And my mom reminded me that um, the elders and that Anastasia was saying thank you, basically, in a spiritual way by because during ceremonies, if it rained a certain way, then it showed if they approved, and if they didn't approve. And my mom, Julie, she's like, she approved. And I honestly, I'm not a crier. I'm not. But when I saw her finally get into um the car, gosh, I can't remember that word either. Um and saw them finally drive her away off of the base, I just broke down. I was like, she's finally going home. Sorry. It was such a powerful moment. And then here I am crying. Sorry. So I'm bawling my eyes out. And they all get together wanting to do group photos, and I'm like, really? After I've been crying. So we do that, and then Bailey just comes over to me and just comforts me. Sorry. So our journey home um was a little bit faster than um getting there, and it was felt great to get home. But the day we were leaving, we learned the guy before, sorry, can you go back one? That's Mark. He's from the Fox tribe, and he was basically um our babysitter. And he dressed in his ceremonial garb for this whole for the ceremony. And little did we know he had COVID. And it was he's a great guy. He's great, very helpful, very respectful. He's ex-military, so he knows what to do and what to say in this whole ordeal. And so we're leaving that day. And then we get home and we get a call saying that, okay, we learned that day that Mark has COVID. And then the next day, everybody at the base had COVID. And we're like, oh no. Oh no. And so we tested, and Bailey was positive. And my dad and Laura tested, and dad was negative, but Laura was positive. So he made it to Kodiak. And he went to the ceremonies here, and that's him in the Kodiak church. And Father Innocent brought her down here. He made it down before all of us. And he kept her and put her on St. Herman's grave. And St. Herman himself had taken in orphan kids and raised them. And he said, well, he could take care of one more until we're ready to send her home. And so she was kept there and taken care of. It was in the smaller church behind this one, and the ceremony was done in the bigger church. And there was a pretty good turnout. And my dad, who does not like to talk to even anybody actually got up in front of both the army. It was twice, and at the museum where they had another ceremony, thanking everybody and letting him know how much he felt. He was just overwhelmed and very honored by the support we had from our community. And later that evening, he's at my house, and I was like, "Dad, we better test you again before you go to Old Harbor. You don't need to bring COVID down there." And he's like, "Okay, you didn't want me to." Tested him. He was positive. I was still negative. I was still trying to like stay away from them and Cloroxing everything. I'm like, I'm not gonna get sick. I'm not gonna get sick. And I believe that was Saturday, and he tested positive. And so he didn't go to Old Harbor. And I got to I went out to the airport, and I wore a mask just in case. I didn't want everybody to be around there. But I was like, you know what? I've been around them. I'm not gonna go Old Harbor yet, even though I'm still saying negative. So our our trip ended there, and it felt like I didn't have any closure. I didn't get to see the end of it, and I was having a really tough time with it. And I needed to be home from my daughter. I'm a single mom, so I needed to take care of her. She had COVID. And a little stinker, all she had was sniffles. She wasn't even sick. So, um, my dad said, "You know what? We did what we did here, and it's time for Uncle Lloyd and his family to take over in Old Harbor." And there in the back of the truck is Father Innocent and Uncle Lloyd and Anastasia with the outer box. And they had the Old Harbor dancers there. The community was there in support. There was a bunch of people. It was amazing. Alicia kept my cousin, Uncle Lloyd's oldest daughter, kept sending me pictures and giving me updates because she knew how much I wanted to be there. And they did so well. They did such an honor at for our they I was just so proud of my community down there, of how they took care of her and how much they welcomed her home. So, yeah, a lot of these dancers are all cousins. And so, yeah, it's a huge family. It was really hard for me not to be there, but I was really happy that they did what they did, and how they kept me in the loop. I honestly, after all this time, I feel like I'm still healing. I'm still trying to process all of this. It's I'm actually not crying as much as I thought I would be, but between everything going on, it was just I felt like I lost a little sister. It felt like a very close family member, and it was a lot. It was a lot, and it's still a lot. And I still want to go Old Harbor and see her. But you could see my dad was right. She was buried in one of the most beautiful places, and he said she'll be able to see the whales going by, the sea lions, the seals, the sea otters, the eagles. He's like the fishing boats. She's going to be well loved and taken care of. We buried her right next to my grandpa Lawrence, who passed away that December before, because we couldn't find the grave of her brother, who had died in the 70s. So we just made sure she was put right next to grandpa, and he would take care of her. So, Yeah, and I also want to say that our school district, the Kodiak Island School District this week is honoring her. They're doing an Orange Shirt Day on Friday, and brought up her story, why we're honoring her. And so I'm very proud to be part of this community. um, I don't know what else to say. I probably have a lot more I'll think about later, but if you guys want to start asking questions or something.
Thank you so much, Cassey.
Thank you.
If you have a question for Cassey, you could raise your hand on if you click on your reaction button, there's a raise hand button if you have a question or comment. I see some comments in the chat as well.
We also have the short video clip that we could play while everyone's collecting their thoughts.
Yeah, so this is a clip of the Nunyak Old Harbor dance group.
Okay, can everyone see the video? Yep. We want it, Chiquita, Chiquita. Igani, Chiquita, Chiquita. Igani, Chiquita, Chiquita. Igani, Chiquita, wonder out, Chiquita, Chiquita. Take a look, take a look. We want it, Chiquita, Chiquita. We want it, Chiquita, Chiquita.
All right. Well, if there's no oh, there's one question. Did Father Innocent drive all the way back?
No, he flew back. We had to fly from Harrisburg, and he was able to escort her all the way back. And of course, we got weathered out from Old Harbor or Kodiak to Old Harbor, so it didn't happen for a few days. But yeah, he followed her the whole way. No, but he didn't keep it in the seating area. They don't allow that. And the box, I don't think would have fit in the seat, but or up in the thing, especially with the outer box. So they didn't just shove her in with the luggage. They made sure that they took care of her. He made sure. No, and honestly, I would try to help as best as I can. I'm not a professional at retrieving our ancestors back. It took a lot of us, and it took a lot of time. And honestly, if we were to try bring home all the kids from all the schools, I think a whole separate entity would have to be made in trying to get these kids home, because in doing so, we found more ancestors in Chamawa and other places that we have family members buried. And it's a whole different way of going than what the Army had, the Army's process. And so, yeah, my stepmom keeps trying to call Chimawa from my grandpa's mom's body, and they won't even return her calls or answer her calls. So it's a lot of that just a few people can't do. It takes a whole group of people. The challenges with the Army, I would say that one of them is that I'm going to give you an example, is Periscovia, the other little girl that was supposed to come back with Anastasia, has taken an extra year because they can't get all the paperwork together to prove that she is family. And I was like, why can't their tribes claim them? And they're like, we can't, it's just policy. And I was like, well, what about the ones that just don't have family members anymore? Why can't their tribes get them? And they're like, it just doesn't happen that way. It has to be family members. And I was like, I said to him, I was like, that needs to change. These kids need to go home. And he's like, well, this is how the Army said it needs to be done. And so, yeah, it angered me. I was because there are tribes that do want the kids home, and actually there are some families whose cultural beliefs say that they don't want to move the body again, so they keep the body there. And I understand that, but the communities who want their kids back can't get them back right now because they don't have any papers showing that they are actually related. I don't know. I the Army is just, I don't know. The guy who is showing us around, he used to be military. He's only allowed to tell us certain things, but he would tell us in a certain way so that we would read in between the lines at what really happened. And if we like said something, he goes, yes, that's exactly what happened, but he wasn't allowed to tell us. They were trying to keep it as a positive thing where it wasn't truly positive. They did do good. They were very respectful in the whole process, but a lot of their policies just really upset me, honestly, because it shouldn't be this hard to get our kids home. I'm not sure what that means.
I have a question. You said earlier that your ancestor weighed like 88 pounds. Were they keeping like very good medical records? We have information on
It was
his-
on her death certificate that they kept. They didn't have a lot. We actually brought a lot more to them and including her picture and her birth date and everything, and they never had that for any of the other kids. So they do have their death certificates and their enrollment records, but that was about all they had.
I have a question. You mentioned working with Father Innocent to bring her back home to Kodiak. What was the church's role in the whole process? And like, what was it like working with Father Innocent and the church to make this happen?
The church's role is that she was born in Kodiak, and the church is very prevalent in our culture. especially the smaller communities. And she was baptized Anastasia under the Russian Orthodox Church. And I actually had to fight and ask and tell them over and over, we need to have the church involved because our family is predominantly Russian Orthodox. And they finally said, okay, I guess we'll include them. But he's very open-minded. He loves the native culture. He actually was out at a culture camp called Digafognak, teaching, actually telling the story of Anastasia out there. He took his own boat over there just so that he could hang out. It's a great camp. He's very understanding. He's very, he loves the native culture. He loves being here in Kodiak. He's a very kind man. And I'm glad that they chose him, or he was chosen to go with us there. Was there another part of the question that I missed? But yeah, he was very understanding and very calming. And actually, we've been doing a lot of studying. It's like when the Russians first came, there was a lot of bad Russians, but there was a lot of good Russians. And they actually learned our languages. They wrote them down. They wrote the Bibles in our language so that we could learn the church. And they were more accepting of Native people and the culture. It was when America came in that everything was banned, and including the way we dressed and the way we spoke and our dancing, everything. We're fighting tooth and nail to get it back now, and we're making good progress. Did that answer? Sorry.
Yes, thank you. I see David asked in the chat whether the BIA was involved at all.
No, the BIA wasn't involved at all. I'm sure that they could help with other things going on, but I think that because this is a army base, that it was mostly the army doing everything, and us working with the seminary, Russian Orthodox seminary, because they have very old records, church records and family records, and the Kodiak Island Museum, and the native village of Ouzinkie, who had taken a bunch of those records and translated them to English. It took a community to get her home, basically, and a lot of work. So no, the BIA wasn't involved. They didn't have anything. I think they were called once and they were like, we have no idea what you're talking about. Koyana Heather, Chimai. I don't know what to say about how anybody would go about getting their family home. This is the only one that we are aware of, and it did start out with us. It started out with the Army. And once we did get a hold of it, we obviously just took everything we could to get her home as soon as possible. Honestly, I really think it's important to bring our kids home, but it's such a huge thing for just a few people to do. And as a community, all of us getting together, I think it could be done, but it's not going to happen with one or two people fighting for them.
Well, thank you so much, Cassie, for leading the way and showing us all that it can be done, and for opening your heart and sharing this really important story and sharing all of those beautiful photos with us. We just can't thank you enough. We so appreciate this. And just a reminder for everyone, if you have others who you think would like to listen to this webinar, we are recording and we will have it on our website, and we also plan to replay it at 6 p.m. And so, yeah, I'll just close by saying a huge thank you to Cassie for being here, and check out ACHE's website if you're interested in what else we're doing for Orange Shirt Day this week. We still have lots more great events coming up so that we can honor the children and their descendants and remember this really important part of our history. So thank you so much.
And thank you for doing this, for putting this up and recognizing that this is close to home. So it's really hard to get your story out. We talked to several newspapers and stuff, but the more recognition, the more it's out and the more it's talked about, the more that people will realize that this is important. Thank you. Koyana, everybody.
Yeah, Cassie, thank you. Thank you, everyone.